So fellas, we've just come off UFC Des Moines with Nickal giving us one of the biggest fraud checks in modern UFC history, and Deiveson and Figueiredo acting awful the entire main event and tapping due to an injury. It was a bit of a weird card with UFC Des Moines, a lot of boring moments, a lot of good moments. Going to get into every single individual fight, and we'll start off with the first fight of the card, which was Julianna and Ivana Petrovic, one of the lowest level fights I think I've ever seen recently in the UFC. This was a terrible fight. It was essentially just back and forth clinch work against the cage, not real much technique. I don't really know how Petrovic managed to receive a brown belt until eventually Julianna again took a dominant position. Couldn't really submit Petrovic and eventually gets the win. Yeah, this was one of the lowest level fights I've seen in a while. Low level women MMA in the flyweight division between a 4-3 fighter. Just shows you everything when a 4-3 fighter has been signed to the UFC. And Ivana Petrovic, how can you dedicate your life to something and be this poor? Like, I don't understand how you can dedicate your life to mixed martial arts and look that bad. Like, I know it's easy to sit here and say that I'm being a keyboard warrior and a keyboard critic, but you've been dedicating your life to this and you can't even throw a basic combination. You're still swinging air. It's awful. I don't know how this is in the UFC, that is supposedly meant to be the biggest organization of MMA in the world. It was just clinch work and swinging at fresh air. The worst striking I've ever seen in a while, where Julianna gains dominant position for longer, gets the more control time, and picks up a decision win over Ivana Petrovic. I can guarantee within 12 to 18 months, Julianna is going to be cut from the UFC. And so is Petrovic. Not really much to break down. Back and forth holding against the cage. And Julianna was like crying at the end of the fight as if she's just won a belt. Like, you've just won one of the most boring decisions in a low-level fight against Ivana Petrovic, probably for a 12-12 contract, and you're crying as if you've just won the Olympic gold medal. So, low-level fight, terrible way to kick off the card, and it definitely wasn't the best way to kick off the card when the next fight up was Don'Tale Mayes versus Thomas Petersen. I mean, when you've got unranked heavyweights going at it, you can almost guarantee it's going to be low level. Now, to be fair, Thomas Petersen did dominate Don'Tale Mayes. He absolutely dominated him in this fight with the grappling from round 1 to round 5. Got dominant position. There was one exciting moment where Thomas Petersen shoots a takedown and Don'Tale Mayes goes for a flying knee. But apart from that, pure domination from Thomas Petersen. This was just heavyweight slop at his finest. Low level, gassed out, no striking, just shoots a takedown, goes for a couple of submissions, lands a couple elbows, and makes 15 minutes out of it. You know what's absolutely disgraceful about this fight and what this fight showcased? Don'Tale Mayes was ranked in the heavyweight division coming into 2025. That's right, Don'Tale Mayes was in the top 15 of the heavyweight division. That guy who has absolutely nothing to offer in the UFC, striking, grappling, anything wise, he was ranked in the top 15 as the best heavyweight fighters in the UFC. That sums up the heavyweight division for you. The fact he was ranked was awful, but yeah, Petersen dominated this fight with wrestling from minute 1 to minute 15. Didn't give him any chance on the feet to strike with him. If anyone, it was Thomas Petersen pressuring with the boxing and then shooting takedowns, just like I said. Don'Tale Mayes is also grappling. If he doesn't get cut from the UFC after this, I don't know what the UFC have with Don'Tale Mayes. If you're going to cut Rosenstrike for losing to Pavlovich, you've got to cut Don'Tale Mayes for not only losing to Thomas Petersen, but what is he now on, like a 3-fight losing streak? He's been dominated by grappling in all 3 of them. He's on like a big losing record in the UFC. So Don'Tale Mayes needs to get out of the UFC as soon as possible. The fact he was ranked is disgraceful. I guess it was a good win for Thomas Petersen, but again, it's one of those wins where you celebrate it because you got to win, but you can already, like, he's not going to go far in the UFC if he keeps up. He's never going to make it into the top 10. So low-level heavyweight slop, just like the first fight on the card was low-level fighting. Thomas Petersen gets to win by dominating Don'Tale Mayes with grappling, lands a couple of elbows, but really not much to break down from this fight. And then we had Gaston Bolanos versus Quang. This card was tough for predictions, man. I was very confident that Gaston Bolanos was going to dominate Quang, but Quang submits Gaston Bolanos and chokes him out cold. Yeah, from round 1 to round 2, it was just Quang dominating Gaston Bolanos, taking him down, not letting him get back up. The second that Bolanos would stand back up, Quang would just take him right back down. And then in the second round, Gaston Bolanos just refuses to tap and Quang chokes him out cold. Walmart Ilia Taporia gets choked out cold in the second round. Yeah, every striking exchange in this fight was fireworks. And you could tell because Gaston Bolanos comes from this kickboxing background. And he kind of knew that when he was on the feet, he had to go. If you waste time on the feet and then you get taken down and, forfeit the rest of the round, you've just wasted a round. So every single time they were striking, it was back and forth. They were swinging and rocking each other back and forth until eventually Quang in the second round takes him down. And yeah, Gaston Bolanos just refused to tap, and then eventually he goes straight to sleep. And it was a good finish for Quang. This was he said it in the post-fight Octagon interview. It was a contract-winning win. If he'd have lost this fight, he probably would have been cut from the UFC. And to be fair, even if it had gone to a decision, he probably would have been cut from the UFC for a bit of a boring performance because the first round there wasn't really much to break down. But He gets the submission in the second round. Gaston Bolanos, I said this coming into this fight, he does have kind of dodgy wrestling. Even in that fight with Cortavius Romius, who's not even in the UFC anymore, he displayed really good striking in that fight. But you put a high-level grappler, high-paced grappler against Gaston Bolanos, the guy's toast, and he's lost multiple times in Bellator as well because of it. So, good win for Quang Lee, chokes out Gaston Bolanos out cold, and gets back in the winning column for the first time in the UFC. For Gaston Bolanos, it'd be quite harsh to cut him from the UFC. I do think he's just got, got solid kickboxing, but the dude definitely needs to work on his grappling if he wants to stay in the organization, because he got dominated from the minute the first takedown was shot. Then we had Marina Rodriguez versus Gillian Robertson. Gillian Robertson gets the second finish in a row due to grappling, gets the TKO over Marina Rodriguez. Yeah, we knew coming into this fight that Marina Rodriguez has awful grappling and she hasn't improved her takedown defense at all. Gillian Robertson takes her down and dominates her with the grappling, attempts a couple of submissions, beats her with ground and pound until eventually gets too much in the second round. As she predicted, gets a TKO in the second round and retires Marina Rodriguez from the sport of MMA. I think outside, this might be a bit of a bold take, outside of Zhang Weili and maybe Tatiana Suarez, I think in the women's strawweight division, Gillian Robertson might be the best grappler in this division. She's got the most submissions in women MMA history. She's an active grappler too. She's not one of these grapplers that takes you down and kind of just stalls. She's actively looking to deal damage with ground and pound. She's looking for submissions. She's looking to end the fight. And she does it nearly every time. When she fought Michelle Watson-Gomez last year, dominated her. When she fought Pinheiro a couple of months ago, dominated. And now she's just dominated Marina Rodriguez and she's going to be in the top 10. She's definitely one of the best grappling prospects. It's kind of a shame she went on the Canada card next week. Like, I don't understand the matchmaking. You've got UFC 315 and one of Canada's best prospects isn't on the Canada card. I don't really understand the matchmaking, but yeah, Marina Rodriguez, bit of a losing skid, decides to retire from the sport of MMA, which to be fair makes sense. She's nearly 40 years old. She's been on a losing streak. She doesn't really seem to be improving in any fight, which is quite a fall from grace because a few years ago she was quite a big prospect in the strawweight division. But yeah, Gillian Robertson, amazing win, dominates her, and I'm a massive fan of watching Gillian Robertson fight, and it's because she's an active grappler. She takes people down and looks to end the fight, and she's really good at doing what she does, damaging people with elbows, bullying people with ground and pound, and if she's not bullying with the ground and pound, she's got the submission. That's two fighters I think she's retired now, with Michelle Watson-Gomez and Marina Rodriguez. She called out, who did she call out? I think she called out Amanda Lemos. I think she deserves better than Amanda Lemos. She's on this huge winning streak. Just got to finish over Marina Rodriguez. I think somebody in the top 3, like a title eliminator. Maybe that's too far-fetched, but a title eliminator could potentially be next for Gillian Robertson. She's one of the best prospects in the strawweight division. Fun to watch, and gets another dominant win against Marina Rodriguez. And then we had Azamat Bekoev versus Ryan Loder. Bekoev's had an amazing start to his UFC career. Knocks out Ryan Loder in the very first round. Yeah, he just eventually, Ryan Loder tries taking Bekoev down. Can't. Tanks about 50 shots to the chin until eventually gets too much and Bekoev drops Ryan Loder and goes for the TKO. And that's 2 first round TKOs in the UFC now for Bekoev this year. He fights very similar to Ikram Aliskerov. I was watching this like, has Ikram Aliskerov got an alt account? You know, this fellow Dagestani who's got good wrestling, good takedown defense, quite a slow guy with low head movement, but hits pretty hard in the middleweight division. Reminds me of Ikram Aliskerov does Azamat Bekoev. But yeah, it's been a great run for Bekoev so far. I don't think he's going to be the next big thing in the middleweight division, but 2 fights in the middleweight division, 2 first round KOs. He's building himself up, looks pretty dangerous. I am a bit put off because he went to I think he went to a split decision with Dylan Budka in LFA, which is never a good look, but he's a talented grappler. He's got such good accuracy as well. I remember his UFC debut where he was so accurate on Zachary Reese and managed to finish him in the first round. He might not be necessarily the most powerful, but he's definitely got accuracy turned up to 100. Yeah, Ryan Loder's a weird fighter. Amazing grappler, but he's got awful striking. But his chin was kind of holding up in this fight. In that first round, or not the first round, but, you know, the first exchange, Azamat Bekoev tanked about 50 shots or landed about 50 shots on Ryan Loder. And Ryan Loder was just eating them until eventually he takes too many shots and gets dropped and finished by Azamat Bekoev. So yeah, this just proves that the Ultimate Fighter, it's dead. The Ultimate Fighter doesn't mean shit nowadays. You know, you win the Ultimate Fighter and you can't even beat a guy who's 1-0 in the UFC. I don't understand the concept of the Ultimate Fighter. We're not in you know, 2005 anymore. The whole hype of winning the Ultimate Fighter has no meaning anymore. Just go to the Contender Series. If you lose on that, get cut from, well, don't get your UFC contract. But no, good win for Bekoev. Finishes Ryan Loder. Excited to see what he does next. And then we had Yana Santos versus Meisha Tate. Yana Santos gets the decision win, yeah. But Yana Santos was kind of bullying Meisha Tate. It was a bit of a scrap for women MMA standards. Meisha Tate was putting on the pressure, but Yana Santos was perfecting the stick and move kind of style in MMA. And then, yeah, it was just a bit of a back and forth scrap. The third round was kind of interesting. Meisha Tate nearly finished Yana Santos, but eventually fumbled it. And Yana Santos ends up getting the decision win. But yeah, this was a decent scrap for women MMA standards. You know, Meisha Tate putting on the pressure, swinging for the fences. But yeah, she was no match for Yana Santos on the feet. Yana Santos was perfect in the stick and move, jabbing at Meisha Tate, bullying her with leg kicks as well, damaged the leg of Meisha Tate, and Meisha Tate was getting lit up like a Christmas tree on the feet in this fight and just getting picked apart on every single strike and exchange. And then in the third round, after about 20 failed takedown attempts, Meisha Tate finally gets a takedown. She gains dominant position, starts raining down ground and pound, decides to take the back instead, which kind of was a bit of a fumble for Meisha Tate, because I think she could have got the finish if she had continued with ground and pound, but she goes for the back, doesn't get the rear naked choke, gets obviously control time because if she's got the back, but obviously she was already 2 rounds to 1, so she ends up losing a decision win. The crowd were booing after this, but Yana Santos definitely deserved to win. It was 2 rounds to 1. I don't really know what Meisha Tate's going to do next. I don't know if she's retired or not, but I don't think she did retire. But she's, you know, 40 years old now. She's coming off a loss. She didn't look amazing in there, I'm going to be honest. I know she's fighting a top 15 fighter in the bantamweight division, but I mean, there's only like 20 fighters in this division anyway, so I'm not sure what's next for Meisha Tate. Maybe give her a can to get a good retirement win on. But good win for Yana Santos. Picks apart Meisha Tate. Looked pretty good with the striking. Looked pretty snappy out there and managed to ride out a decision win and beat Meisha Tate, who's obviously past her prime. And yeah, I would recommend retirement now for Meisha Tate, but you know, she's not awful. She looked good in the third round, I guess, but yeah, she's definitely getting up there in age, but I guess she had taken a bit of time off. Good win for Yana Santos anyway. Then we had Jeremy Stephens versus Mason Jones, one of the more hyped up fights on the card. This was a banger for 2 rounds straight. Mason Jones were kind of bullying Jeremy Stephens in this fight, but then eventually Jeremy Stephens would fire back and the crowd would go wild because they think that Mason Jones has been wobbled. And then in the third round, Mason Jones turns into a Nurmagomedov where he just completely out-grapples Jeremy Stephens, absolutely toys with him when it comes to the grappling. Yeah, this was pure domination from Mason Jones. Yeah, it was pure domination. Even on the feet in the first 2 rounds, he was styling on Jeremy Stephens, attacking the legs, outboxing him, landing combinations. It was a pretty dominant performance from Mason Jones. Jeremy Stephens had success, and he has got that dog in him, does Jeremy Stephens, where he'd land back every now and then and, you know, make a bit of a comeback. But it was just domination from Mason Jones, and he's definitely UFC level caliber. You know, he's got a win over David Onama. He's made it competitive with Mike Davis. He just dominated Jeremy Stephens. So I say, yeah, Mason Jones, definitely UFC caliber. And it was a fun little scrap where Jeremy Stephens was kind of getting beaten up like a punching bag, but every now and then he'd make it, you know, he'd land a big shot on Mason Jones, the crowd would go wild, and then in the third round, he'd out-wrestle him. I've seen a bit of criticism online for Mason Jones because he went for the heavy grappling approach in the third round, and I can understand it. You know, you're fighting an old legend in Jeremy Stephens, you kind of don't really gain anything from riding out a decision win, but I guess you don't really want to be risking it when the hardest, you know, 145, or who cares, when he cares, people don't fucking move. He's in the octagon with you, but good win for Mason Jones. And it was fun to see Jeremy Stephens back in the UFC, but he's clearly not UFC worthy. He fought Mason Jones, who's making his second run in the UFC, got dominated. I think BKFC is the perfect organization for Jeremy Stephens, just like Mark Perry. Perfect time to retire. I'm not saying he needs to retire. You know, I wouldn't protest if he was to fight in the UFC again. I think there's a lot of fun matchups for him, but in terms of if he's UFC worthy, I would say no, he's not. But it was a fun scrap, fun back and forth scrap between the two of them. Good win for Mason Jones, dominated Jeremy Stephens, and Jeremy Stephens got that dog in him. Then we had Cameron Smotherman versus Serhey Sidey. Yeah, this went back to the bit of a boring side of the fights where Serhey Sidey gets the decision. It was just a lot of shadow boxing in this fight. A lot of feeling each other out. A lot of kind of feints in this fight where eventually Serhey Sidey would mix it up with the takedowns and kind of just attack the legs of Cameron Smotherman and get the win of a Cameron Smotherman. It was a great game plan executed by Serhey Sidey. I know I kind of critiqued it, you know, for not being a fun fight. It wasn't a fun fight, but it was a good game plan. High volume against a guy like Cameron Smotherman. Took him down, mixed it up with the takedowns, and again, similar to the Gillian Robertson situation, I don't understand why Serhey Sidey wasn't on the Canada card. You've got UFC Canada next week, and you haven't got Serhey Sidey competing on the card. That doesn't really make sense. But yeah, I kind of knew that Smotherman was a tad bit overhyped. I know I picked him to win this fight, but, you know, he's lost a few times on the regional scene, and all he's got is boxing. He has no kicks, no grappling. All he's got is boxing combinations, and he did look good with the boxing combinations. Every now and then, Serhey Sidey would throw a jab, he'd duck the jab, go for a liver shot, and he'd look pretty good. But he's a low-output boxer. That's all Cameron Smotherman is. I can't really call him a prospect in this division. It was a decent technical striking matchup. If you're a fan of chess matches, if you're a fan of technical striking, this was the fight to you, but nothing crazy in this fight. Serhey Sidey picks up a decision win. This fight probably should have been next week on the Canada card to maybe celebrate the win of Serhey Sidey more, but is what it is. Then we had Montel Jackson versus Daniel Marcus again. A bit of a lackluster fight, and Yeah, Daniel Marcos might have been one of the most, like, he's just a perfect example that an undefeated record means nothing in MMA. Yeah, Montel Jackson won this fight pretty comfortably, was bullying him with the leg kicks in this fight, tripping him up every now and then with like a bit of a judo trip. And then eventually, apart from that, he was just holding against the cage. Nearly finished him in that third round after he started swinging, but it was kind of just leg kicks, hold against the cage, somebody shoots a takedown, get back up, leg kicks, somebody shoots a takedown, repeat all over again. But I will say this about Montel Jackson. He might not be a big star in the bantamweight division. I don't think I've ever heard him say a single word. He might not have the most fan-friendly style, but he's super talented in the bantamweight division. He's on a huge winning streak. Just been the first guy to beat Daniel Marcos. He's a well-rounded dude, good grappling, strong for the division, popping his hands. I just wish he'd turn up the volume. I think if he threw a little bit more output, put a bit more pressure on his opponents, looked to kind of take a few more risks, he'd be a real good potential for a big prospect in the bantamweight division. And I guess he still is, because he's got keys to be in the top 10 and maybe even the top 5. But you know, I just think he needs to turn that volume a bit more, you know, maybe, you know, pose a bit more risk to his own game. But I kind of knew Daniel Marcos was a fraud going into this fight. He's just an output striker with nothing else. Is Daniel Marcos. He's got no grappling, nothing really going for him apart from being a bit of an output striker. Barely beat Davy Grant. I don't think he should have beat Davy Grant. Went to a split decision with Adrian Yanez. Went to a no contest with Archie Long. He was never one of these undefeated prospects for the bantamweight division, but good win for Montel Jackson. Got to be somebody in the top 10 next for him. And for Daniel Marcos, yeah, just kind of took a bit of a beating for 15 minutes straight. Not really much to break down from this fight either. Wasn't a banger. But then we had Santiago Ponzinibbio versus D-Rod. Now the card starts to kind of heat up a bit, where Santiago Ponzinibbio... not Santiago Ponzinibbio, where Daniel Rodriguez gets the KO in the third round. Yeah, this was another back and forth scrap where, you know, D-Rod would land a combination and then Ponzinibbio would fire something back, and it seemed to be a bit of a back and forth scrap in the welterweight division until eventually D-Rod lands like a 6-punch combination on Santiago Ponzinibbio, and eventually just knocks him out cold, not out cold, but gets the knockout in the third round over Santiago Ponzinibbio. But yeah, this was a fun fight. D-Rod nearly finishes Ponzinibbio in the first round, lands a good combination, wobbles him all over the place. Ponzinibbio just gets wobbled all the time, I've realised. Like, you land one good shot on Ponzinibbio, and even if he's not wobbled, I don't know what it is, his mannerisms make him look like he's wobbled. He's got these, I don't know, it's kind of just wobbles all over the place. It's a weird thing from Santiago Ponzinibbio, but it was a bit of a competitive kickboxing match. It was going in the favour of D-Rod until eventually in that third round lands a nasty combination, wobbles him and puts him nearly out cold. This is bad habit of Santiago Ponzinibbio, where he gets KO'd and then immediately protested. It happened with Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland flatlines him face first to the canvas, and then the referee stops the fight, and then Ponzinibbio starts protesting. And pretty much the same instance in this fight. D-Rod, you know, lands a massive shot on Ponzinibbio, pretty much flatlines him, and then the referee stops the fight, and then he starts protesting, and then a second later is wobbling all over the place. But it was a great win by D-Rod. I did pick Ponzinibbio to win this fight because I thought that D-Rod was maybe on his way out, but he gets the win. He picks up the win over Santiago Ponzinibbio. Again, with the awful call-out of Jake Matthews. Why would you call out Jake Matthews? Who the fuck cares about Jake Matthews in the welterweight division? Call out somebody close to the rankings. Call out a Randy Brown. Obviously, he's not going to get that fight, but you know what I mean? Just call out somebody who's close to the top 15. He's now going down the career of Tyrone Woodley. He's now, he said in the post-fight Octagon interview, he's starting a rap career. That's never really a good sign when you're an MMA fighter and you've been punched a few too many times, and you've now decided to start rapping. Didn't go well for Tyrone Woodley. Can't imagine it going well for D-Rod. But anyway, good win for D-Rod. Knocked out Ponzinibbio. That's a good win for him. First finish in a few years as well. Kind of needed that as well because he was on a bit of a losing streak, and then he obviously beat Morono by split decision, but he got the KO win. Back on the 2-fight winning streak. Good win for Daniel Rodriguez. And then we had Bo Nickal versus Reiner. The Bo Nickal experiment's over. Fraud checked. Reiner shows Bo Nickal the first bit of adversity he's had to see in the UFC and gets the TKO in the second round. Yeah, Reiner dominated this fight. In the first round, managed to gain dominant position on top of Bo Nickal until eventually the end of the first round stopped. And then in the second round, landed like a knee to the body and then another body shot. And Bo Nickal was like, fuck this. I don't like getting hit as much as I thought I did. I'm just going to crumple up and, you know, get finished like Anthony Smith. But Bo Nickal might have been one of the most overhyped fighters in UFC history. He gets stuck on the main card of every big show, stuck on the main card of UFC 300. People think he's going to be the next big thing. Dana White thought he was going to be a future champion, saying that he's going to go out there and beat Chimaev. And then he faces his first bit of adversity in the octagon and gets finished. This genuinely looked like Anthony Smith reincarnated. Anthony Smith retires, and then a week later, you've got him back in middleweight form in Bo Nickal. But yeah, Reiner dominated Bo Nickal in this fight. He was dominated in the clinch with the knees to the body and the elbows in the clinch. took him down, dominated them on the ground with the control time, and if anybody was going to get a submission, it was going to be Reiner, and then they get back up on the feet. He lands like a big shot on Bo Nickal. Bo Nickal kind of gets wobbled. He lands another big shot to the body, and Bo Nickal just gives up. How can you call out the likes of Khamzat Chimaev and say that you're going to be a future champion and that you dominate a lot of these contenders and take one body shot from Reiner of all people, who's not really known for his striking, and crumple up? That's a massive fraud check from Bo Nickal. This isn't just, you know, you had a competitive fight with Reiner and you lost a decision. This is like, you went from being Zhang Mingyang to Anthony Smith within the same fight. That's what I'm talking about. Like, you went from being a big prospect to looking like you might never crack the top 15. So, great win for Reiner. 3 wins in the UFC, 3 finishes. Called out Sean Strickland. That's a bit of a, you know, that's a big step up to go from unranked to Sean Strickland. But I think somebody in the top 6, top 5 of the middleweight division, I don't mind for Reiner. And for Bo Nickal, dude, he's going to have to go take a kickboxing class, you know, or something, work on his striking, or, you know what, maybe even just lose a bit of chub and go down to welterweight, because he's quite a small guy for the middleweight division, he's Bo Nickal. But great win for Reiner. This is definitely one of the biggest fraud checks we've had this year, and we've had a lot of fraud checks this year, and gets the win over Bo Nickal, finishing him, and hopefully that's back to the prelims for Bo Nickal. You can go fight another scrub, another can, and get back in the winning column. And then we had the main event, bit of a weird main event. Cory Sandhagen gets the submission by tap out in the second round after Deiveson Figueiredo taps out. This was a weird fight. To sum up this fight, Deiveson Figueiredo goes for about, 50 leg locks in this fight. Every single time Cory Sandhagen was on dominant position, he goes for a leg lock, which obviously he never got and was kind of getting bullied with ground and pound. And then in the second round, I think it was an injury. He decides to tap out due to injury. But yeah, I will say this, Deiveson Figueiredo looked awful in this fight. Something looked off, even in between the corners, like after the first round in the corner. It looked like he didn't want to be there. He's just attempting leg locks, heel hooks. That's not something we usually see from Deiveson Figueiredo. Even in that fight with Petersen, he looked amazing. And then to go out there, and I'm not going to say he quit. I do believe him that he got an injury, but that just didn't really look good for Figgy. You know, he attempted a few heel hooks, then got injured. Looks like there's going to be title aspirations over. He's getting up there in age. Obviously, former flyweight champion, but that's a 2-fight losing streak now for Figgy. I think that's the title aspirations over. Great performance from Cory Sandhagen, though, from what we can break down. He looked amazing on the feet, stance switching, was attacking the leg of Deiveson Figueiredo, was definitely in the lead on the feet, took down Deiveson Figueiredo as well in the second round to get dominant position, escaped any danger, and was just in control the entire fight. I know Petersen's in the mix. Petersen did just beat Deiveson Figueiredo and he's got a win over Cory Sandhagen before, so I know it's kind of disrespectful to just say Sandhagen's next, but that's a huge win for Cory Sandhagen. You know, there's an argument to make that he can deserve a title fight. I think if Sean O'Malley beats Merab, Sean O'Malley versus Sandhagen, I'm not even mad at that fight. It's a fight that a lot of people have been waiting for a long time in the bantamweight division. You know, I think that's a bit of a banger fight for a title fight. 2 strikers with Cory Sandhagen's grappling base too. Sandhagen versus O'Malley, or even Merab for that case, could be a banger of a title fight. But good win for Cory Sandhagen. Bit of a shame we couldn't see the full 25 minutes. And I do think this would have been one of the highest level fights we'd have seen in the UFC in a while. But overall, good win for Cory Sandhagen. And he gets back in the winning column, potentially #1 contender win. But yeah, that's my thoughts on UFC Des Moines. Bit of a weird card. I'd say it was a below average card for a crowded fight night. But it is what it is. We got some fraud checks. We got some finishes. Let me know your thoughts on this card. Thank you for watching.